Jake Martinez stood at the window of the mining station and watched the sunrise on Kepler 442b. The planet's red sun cast long shadows across the rocky ground. It was his third year as commander of the mining station, and he still loved seeing the alien sunrise every morning. The station was huge. 250 people lived and worked there. They had come from Earth to dig for special metals that were worth a lot of money. The metals were deep in the planet's rocks, and it took big machines to get them out. Lisa Thompson sat at her desk in the communications room. She was the person who talked to Earth and other space stations. Every day she sent reports about how much metal they had found. Every day she got messages from their families back home. The work was hard, but the people were happy. They had signed up for 5 years on the planet. After that, they would go back to Earth with enough money to live well for the rest of their lives. That Tuesday morning started like any other day. Jake walked around the station, checking on the workers. The miners were already deep underground, using their big machines to break apart the rocks. The metal workers were cleaning and sorting the metals they had found the day before. Lisa was drinking her coffee when her computer started beeping. She looked at the screen and saw something that made her heart stop. There were ships coming toward the planet. Big ships. Ships that were not from Earth. "Commander Martinez," she said into her radio, "we have a problem. There are alien ships coming this way." Jake ran to the communications room. He looked at the screen and saw 5 black ships moving through the planet's atmosphere. They were shaped like long knives, and they moved without making any sound. "How long until they get here?" Jake asked. 10 minutes, Lisa said. Her hands were shaking as she typed on her computer. "I'm sending a message to Earth now." Jake pressed the alarm button. All around the station, red lights started flashing. A loud sound told everyone to stop working and go to the safe rooms. But it was too late. The alien ships landed around the mining station like a circle. They were much bigger than they had looked from far away. Each ship was as long as a city. Block and as tall as a building. Doors opened on the sides of the ships. The creatures that came out were unlike anything the humans had ever seen. They were tall, much taller than humans. Their skin was almost clear, like glass. Their eyes were large and seemed to glow with a soft blue light. The aliens moved slowly, like they were floating instead of walking. They wore long robes that seemed to be made of light itself. When they spoke, their voices went directly into the humans' minds. "You have done wrong," the lead alien said without moving his mouth. His voice was calm but very cold. "You have taken things from a place that is holy to us." Jake stepped forward. He was scared, but he was the commander. It was his job to protect his people. "We are sorry," Jake said. "We did not know this place was important to you. We checked all the space maps before we came here. They said no one lived on this planet." The alien tilted his head. "Your maps are wrong. Your people do not understand what is holy and what is not. You see only rocks and metal. We see the spirits of our ancestors." More aliens came out of the ships. They carried weapons that looked like long sticks of light. The weapons did not make any sound, but when they pointed them at the mining machines, the machines stopped working. "My name is Jake Martinez," Jake said. "I am the commander here. If we have done something wrong, we can talk about it. We can fix it." "There is nothing to fix," the alien said. "You have disturbed something that should not be disturbed. Now you must be punished." Tony Garcia was a former soldier who worked as an engineer at the station. He had been in many dangerous situations before. He knew when a fight was hopeless. These aliens had better weapons and better ships. There were only 250 humans, and there seemed to be thousands of aliens. "Don't fight them," Tony told the other humans through his radio. "We can't win this." Amy Clark was a doctor who studied how people think and feel. She watched the aliens carefully. They did not seem angry or excited. They seemed sad, like they were disappointed in the humans. "They think we are like children," Amy said quietly to Jake. "They think we don't understand what we have done wrong." The aliens moved through the station quickly. They did not hurt anyone, but they made it clear that the humans had no choice. Every person on the station was taken to the alien ships. Inside of the alien ships was even stranger than the outside. The walls seemed to be alive, pulsing with soft light. The floors felt warm under their feet. Everything was curved and smooth, like the inside of a giant egg. The humans were put into rooms that were comfortable but locked. They had beds and food and water, but they could not leave. The alien ships lifted off from the planet and flew into space. "Where are they taking us?" Lisa asked Jake. "I don't know," Jake said, "but I think we're going to find out." The trip through space took 3 days. The humans could not see outside the ships, but they could feel when the ships changed direction or speed. Sometimes they felt like they were going very fast. Sometimes they felt like they were floating. On the 3rd day, the ships stopped. The aliens came to get the humans. They were taken to a new place, a place that would become their home for a long time. The prison planet was called Zirion 7. It had 3 suns, so it was never dark. The light from the suns made everything look like it was made of crystal. The prison itself was a huge building that seemed to grow out of the rock of the planet. "This is where you will stay," the alien leader said. "This prison has held the worst criminals in the galaxy for 5,000 years. No one has ever escaped from here. No one ever will." The prison was like a maze. The walls were made of some kind of material that the humans had never seen before. It was harder than steel, but seemed to glow with its own light. The hallways went in all directions, up and down as well as left and right. Ben Rodriguez was a scientist who studied space and time. He looked at the prison walls and knew that they were made with technology far beyond anything humans had created. "This place is impossible," Ben said to Carol Davis, a woman who worked with computers. "The walls seem to change shape when you're not looking at them." Carol nodded. She had been trying to understand how the prison worked. "It's like the whole building is alive. It watches us and changes itself to keep us trapped." The aliens who ran the prison were called Zephyrians. They could read human thoughts, at least the simple ones. They knew when someone was planning to escape before that person even knew it themselves. Annie Lewis had been a soldier like Tony. He knew about prisons and how to survive in them. But this prison was different from any prison on Earth. The trick, Danny said to Ellen Wright, a woman who studied languages, is not to think about escaping. Don't even think the word escape. Think about other things. Think about home. Think about food. Think about anything except getting out of here. The humans were split up and put in different parts of the prison. Jake was put in a cell with 3 other humans he had never met before. Lisa was put in a different section with other women. Tony and Amy were in completely different areas. But even though they were separated, the humans began to do what humans always do when they are in trouble. They began to think. They began to plan. They began to hope. The Zephyrians thought that hope was foolish. They had built the perfect prison. They had trapped creatures much smarter and stronger than humans. They thought humans would give up quickly. They were wrong. Frank Kelly was a man who studied rocks and minerals. Even in prison, he kept studying. He looked at the walls and the floors and the ceiling of his cell. He noticed things that the Zephyrians thought were not important. "These walls," Frank said to his cellmate, Grace Peterson, who studied materials and metals, "they're not just one thing. They're made of many different things mixed together. Some of these things, I think I've seen them before." Grace looked at the walls more carefully. "You're right. Some of these materials we were mining." Then back on Kepler 442b, the Zephyrians are using the same metals we were trying to dig up. That was the first clue. The first hint that maybe, just maybe, the perfect prison was not so perfect after all. The humans had been in prison for 1 month. They were learning the rules and the routines. They were learning how to stay alive and how to stay sane. But most importantly, they were learning about their prison, and slowly, very slowly, they were beginning to understand that the Zephyrians had made a mistake. They had put the humans in a prison made partly of materials that the humans understood better than anyone else in the galaxy. Jake Martinez stood in his cell and looked out the small window at the 3 suns of Zirion 7. He thought about his people scattered throughout the prison. He thought about Earth so far away. He thought about the metals in the walls around him, and for the first time since they had been captured, Jake Martinez began to smile. The Zephyrian warden was called the Architect. He was taller than the other aliens, and his skin seemed to glow brighter. He had built this prison, and he was very proud of it. On the second day, the Architect came to talk to the humans. He did not speak with his mouth. His words appeared directly in their minds, like thoughts that were not their own. "Welcome to Zirion 7, the Architect said. "I want you to understand what this place is. This is not just a prison. This is a work of art. This is perfection." The humans were gathered in a large room. The walls of the room seemed to pulse with light, like a giant heart beating. The floor was smooth and warm under their feet. "For 5,000 years, we have kept the galaxy's worst criminals here," the Architect continued. "We have held beings who can bend metal with their minds. We have held creatures who can walk through walls. We have held monsters who can live. For 10,000 years. Jake Martinez looked around at his fellow humans. They all looked small and weak compared to the creatures the Architect was describing. "None of them ever escaped," the Architect said. "Do you know why? Because this prison thinks. It learns. It adapts. The moment you start planning to escape, the prison knows. The moment you think about breaking free, the walls become stronger." "Lisa." Thompson raised her hand. "What if we don't want to escape? What if we just want to go home?" The Architect made a sound that might have been laughter. "Home is a thought. Home is a dream. This prison can read your dreams. It knows when you are thinking about anywhere that is not here." Tony Garcia had been studying the room while the Architect spoke. The walls were not just glowing. They were moving, very slowly, so slowly that you could barely see it, but they were changing shape. "The prison is alive," Tony whispered to Amy Clark, who was standing next to him. Amy nodded. She had been watching the Architect carefully. "Not just alive. It's intelligent. It's thinking about us right now." The Architect continued his speech. "This prison has 3 levels of security. The first level is physical. The walls, the floors, the ceilings. They are made of materials that cannot be broken. They are harder than diamond. They are stronger than any metal in the galaxy." Ben Rodriguez was listening carefully. As a scientist, he knew that nothing was truly unbreakable. Everything had a weakness. Everything had a limit. "The second level is mental," the Architect said. "The prison reads your thoughts. It knows your fears. It knows your hopes. It uses this knowledge to keep you trapped." Carol Davis thought about her computer programs back on Earth. Every program had bugs. Every system had flaws. Maybe this prison system had bugs too. "The third level is time," the Architect said. "This prison exists in a special bubble of time. One day here is one day for you. But outside this prison, years pass. Your friends forget you. Your families think you are dead. Even if you could escape, you would return to a world that has moved on without you." Danny Lewis had been in military prisons before. He knew that the worst part of prison was not the walls or the bars. It was the feeling that you were forgotten. The feeling that the world outside did not care about you anymore. But do not worry, the architect said. We will take care of you. We will give you food and water and a place to sleep. All we ask is that you accept your fate. All we ask is that you stop hoping. After the architect left, the humans were taken to their cells. The prison was like a giant puzzle. The hallways twisted and turned in ways that did not make sense. Sometimes a hallway would lead up, then down, then up again. But somehow you would end up lower than where you started. Ellen Wright tried to make a map of the prison in her head. She was good with languages, and she thought maybe she could find a pattern in the way the prison was built. But every time she thought she understood the pattern, it would change. The walls are moving, Ellen said to her cellmate, a woman named Nancy Rogers, who had been a teacher on the mining station. Not fast, but they're definitely moving. Nancy nodded. I've been watching too. It's like the prison is rearranging itself, like it's trying to confuse us. The cells were small but comfortable. Each cell had 2 beds, a table, and a small window. The window looked out onto the prison yard, where other prisoners walked in circles or sat in groups. The other prisoners were aliens from all over the galaxy. Some looked like giant insects. Some looked like walking trees. Some looked like creatures made of living rock. All of them had one thing in common. They looked defeated. How long have you been here? Jake asked an alien who looked like a large cat with blue fur. Time has no meaning here, the cat alien replied. I have been here since my world was young. My children's children are probably dead by now. Frank Kelly watched the other prisoners carefully. They moved slowly, like they were walking through thick water. They rarely spoke to each other. They seemed to have given up all hope. We can't let that happen to us, Frank said to Grace Peterson. We can't let this place break our spirits. Grace agreed. We need to stay human. We need to remember who we are and where we came from. The food in the prison was strange but filling. It came from machines in the walls. You would press a button, and food would appear. It tasted like nothing the humans had ever eaten before, but it gave them energy. Henry Adams was a scientist who studied living things. He was curious about the food. He saved small pieces of it and studied them when the guards were not watching. This food is not made, Henry said to Ian Brooks, an engineer who shared his cell. It's grown. The machines in the walls are actually living creatures. They're making food from their own bodies. Ian was disturbed by this information. So we're eating alien flesh? Not exactly, Henry said. It's more like we're eating something that the prison creates specially for us. The question is, what is the prison putting in this food? What is it doing to our bodies? The prison guards were Zephyrians, like the architect, but smaller and less bright. They moved through the prison like ghosts, appearing and disappearing without warning. They never spoke to the prisoners, but the prisoners could feel them watching. Julie Morgan had been an astronaut before joining the mining mission. She was used to being watched and monitored, but the way the Zephyrian guards watched was different. It felt like they were looking inside her mind. They're not just watching our actions, Julie said to Kevin Turner, a man who worked with computers. They're watching our thoughts. They're studying us. Kevin had been trying to understand how the prison's computer systems worked. But there were no computers, at least not the kind he was used to. The prison's intelligence seemed to come from the walls themselves. I think the whole prison is one big computer, Kevin said. Not made of metal and circuits, but made of some kind of living material. It's like the prison is a brain, and we're thoughts inside that brain. The days in prison followed a strict routine. The prisoners woke up when the lights got brighter. They ate breakfast from the wall machines. They had exercise time in the yard, They ate lunch. They had rest time in their cells. They ate dinner. They went to sleep when the lights got dimmer. But the humans began to notice things that the other prisoners did not notice. They began to see patterns in the way the prison worked. Linda Carter had been a music teacher on the mining station. She had a good ear for sounds and rhythms. She noticed that the prison made music. Very soft, almost impossible to hear, but it was there. The walls are humming, Linda said to Max Powell, an electrician. There's a pattern to it. It's like the prison is singing to itself. Max listened carefully. Linda was right. There was a very faint sound coming from the walls. It was like a heartbeat, but more complex. Maybe that's how the prison thinks. Max said, maybe it thinks in music instead of words. The humans began to work together in small groups. They could not all meet at once because they were in different parts of the prison. But they found ways to pass information to each other. Oliver. Gray was only 8 years old, the youngest human in the prison. His mother, Patricia, was worried about him. But Oliver seemed to be handling prison life better than many of the adults. The walls like me, Oliver told his mother. They don't think I'm dangerous. They let me go places that other people can't. Go. Patricia thought her son was just being imaginative. But other parents noticed the same thing about their children. The young humans seemed to move through the prison more easily than the adults. Paul Martinez was Jake's younger brother. He worked with computer systems, like Kevin. But Paul was interested in how the prison's intelligence worked. It's not really reading our thoughts, Paul said to Quincy Johnson, a man who had been a spy before joining the mining mission. It's reading our emotions. It's reading our intentions. If we can control our emotions, maybe we can hide our intentions. Quincy had been trained to control his emotions and hide his thoughts. It was part of his job as a spy. He began to teach the other humans how to do the same thing. The trick, Quincy said, is not to stop thinking about escape. That's impossible. The trick is to think about it in a way that doesn't create strong emotions. Think about it like you're solving a puzzle, not like you're planning to break free. The humans had been in prison for 2 months. They were beginning to understand how the prison worked. More importantly, they were beginning to understand how they could work together. Rachel Kim had been a diplomat before joining the mining mission. She was goo. 3 months had passed since the humans arrived at Zarian 7. The other alien prisoners watched them with curiosity. Most new prisoners would be broken by now, walking around like ghosts. But the humans were different. They seemed to be getting stronger, not weaker. Frank Kelly spent his days studying the walls of his cell. He had been a geologist on the mining station, and he knew rocks and metals better than anyone. What he found in the prison walls surprised him. Grace, Frank whispered to his cellmate during their rest time. Look at this. He showed her a tiny piece of the wall that had flaked off. Do you see this silver streak? Grace Peterson looked at the piece carefully. As a materials scientist, she knew rare metals when she saw them. That's quantum silver, she said. We were mining this exact material on Kepler 442b. Frank nodded. The Zephyrians built this prison using the same materials we were trying to dig up. They think these metals are just pretty rocks. They don't know what they can really do. The humans had learned to communicate without words. Danny Lewis had taught them a system of signals using body language. A certain way of walking meant, I have information. A specific gesture while eating meant, meet me later. Even the way they breathed could carry messages. The Zephyrian guards could read surface thoughts, but they could not understand the complex web of human communication. Humans used not just words and thoughts, but emotions, memories, and even dreams to share information. Henry Adams had been studying the food from the wall machines. He discovered that it was not just food. It was a living organism that was designed to keep prisoners healthy and calm. But Henry was a biotechnology expert, and he knew how to work with living organisms. "The food is trying to change us," Henry explained to Ian Brooks. "It's making chemicals in our bodies that are supposed to make us peaceful and obedient. But I think I can change it back." Henry had been saving tiny amounts of his own saliva and blood. He mixed them with the food in specific ways, creating new chemical reactions. The food began to change, becoming more nutritious and less controlling. "We need to share this with everyone," Henry said. "But we have to be careful. If the guards notice that we're becoming less obedient, they might change the food completely." The children were the key to the plan. Oliver Gray and the other young. Humans could move through the prison more easily than adults. The prison's intelligence saw them as harmless, not worth watching carefully. "The walls talk to me," Oliver told his mother, Patricia. "They don't use words, but I can feel what they're thinking. They're lonely. They've been alone for thousands of years." Patricia thought her son was just being imaginative, but other parents reported similar things. The children seemed to understand the prison in ways that adults could not. Julie Morgan, the former astronaut, began to coordinate the information that the children were gathering. She realized that the prison was not just a building. It was a living creature that had been alone for centuries. "The prison is not evil," Julie explained to Kevin Turner. "It's just doing what it was made to do, but it's tired. It's been keeping prisoners for so long that it's forgotten why it was built." Kevin had been studying the prison's intelligence system. He discovered that it was not like human computers. It was more like a giant brain made of living crystal. And like any brain, it could be confused, tricked, or even convinced to change its mind. "We don't need to break out of the prison," Kevin said. "We need to convince the prison to let us go." The humans began to work on the prison's psychology. They started acting like they belonged there. They stopped looking at the walls like they were prison barriers. They started looking at them like they were part of their home. Linda Carter, the music teacher, had been listening to the prison's humming for months. She discovered that she could hum back, creating harmonies with the prison's song. When she did this, the walls seemed to relax around her. "The prison likes music," Linda told Max Powell. "It's been singing to itself for thousands of years, but no one has ever sung back to it." Max, the electrician, studied the prison's electrical systems. He found that they were not really electrical at all. They were more like the nervous system of a living creature. When Linda sang, the prison's nervous system responded with pleasure. "We're not prisoners," Max realized. "We're the first friends this prison has ever had." The humans began to treat the prison like a friend instead of an enemy. They talked to the walls. They thanked the food machines. They even said goodnight to their cells before going to sleep. The prison began to respond. The walls became smoother and more comfortable. The food became more varied and tasty. The lights became softer and more natural. Paul Martinez, Jake's brother, had been working with the prison's central intelligence. He discovered that the prison had been programmed to learn from its prisoners. It was supposed to understand them and adapt to keep them contained. "The prison is learning about humans," Paul explained to Quincy Johnson, "but it's learning the wrong things. It's learning to like us instead of learning to control us." Quincy, the former spy, understood immediately. "We're not teaching it to keep us prisoner. We're teaching it to see us as part of itself." The plan was beginning to work. The prison was starting to see the humans not as prisoners, but as components of its own system, like cells in a body or thoughts in a mind. Rachel Kim, the diplomat, had been studying Zephyrian psychology. She realized that the aliens were very spiritual beings. They saw everything in terms of purpose and meaning. They believed that everything in the universe had a reason for existing. "The Zephyrians built this prison to serve a purpose," Rachel explained to Sam White. But they never told the prison what to do when that purpose was fulfilled. Sam, the former soldier, saw the strategic implications. So if we can convince the prison that its purpose has changed, it might change its behavior. The humans began to act like they were not prisoners at all, but rather like they were employees of the prison. They started helping with maintenance tasks. They organized the other prisoners. They even began to help the guards with their duties. Nancy Rogers, the former teacher, was especially good at this. She started teaching classes to the other prisoners, helping them learn to read and write in different languages. The prison's intelligence saw this as a positive development. The prison thinks we're making it better, Nancy told Linda Carter. It thinks we're helping it achieve its purpose more effectively. Tom Harrison, the writer, had been documenting everything that happened in the prison. He realized that they were creating a new kind of relationship between prisoner and prison, something that had never existed before in the galaxy. We're not escaping, Tom wrote in his hidden journal. We're evolving. We're becoming something new, and we're helping the prison evolve too. The humans had learned to work with the prison systems instead of against them. They had learned to speak its language of emotion and purpose. They had learned to be friends with their captor. Victoria Green, the security officer, had been studying the prison's security systems. She discovered that they were based on the assumption that prisoners would always try to escape. But what? If the prisoners did not want to escape? What if they wanted to stay? The security systems are confused, Victoria explained to Wayne Davis. They don't know how to handle prisoners who are happy to be here. Wayne had been the most depressed of all the humans when they first arrived, but now he was smiling. Maybe that's because we're not really prisoners anymore. Maybe we're something else. The other alien prisoners began to notice the changes in the humans. Some of them had been in the prison for hundreds of years. They had never seen prisoners who seemed to be thriving instead of surviving. "What are you doing?" asked the blue cat alien that Jake had spoken to months earlier. "Why are you not broken? Like the rest of us?" Jake thought about how to answer. "We're not fighting the prison," he said finally. "We're joining it. We're becoming part of it." The cat alien looked confused. "But why would you want to become part of a prison?" "Because," Jake said, "if we're part of the prison, then we're not really prisoners anymore." The humans had been working on their plan for months. They had changed the prison's food to make themselves stronger and smarter. They had learned to communicate with the prison's intelligence. They had convinced the prison that they were friends, not enemies, but the most important change was in themselves. They had learned to see opportunity where others saw only problems. They had learned to find hope in the most hopeless situation. Ben Rodriguez, the quantum physicist, had been studying the prison's time distortion field. He discovered that it was not as stable as the Zephyrians believed. With the right kind of manipulation, it could be changed. "Time moves differently here," Ben explained to Carol Davis. "But that's not necessarily a bad thing. If we can control the time field, we can control when and how we leave." Carol, the computer programmer, had been learning to interface with the prison's intelligence directly. She had discovered that she could give it new instructions, new purposes, new goals. "The prison wants to be useful," Carol said. "It wants to serve a purpose. We just need to give it a new purpose. A purpose that includes letting us go." The humans were ready for the next phase of their plan. They had spent months preparing. The prison and themselves. They had built trust and friendship. The breakthrough came from an unexpected place. Linda Carter had been humming with the prison walls for months, learning their rhythms and songs. One morning, she discovered something that changed everything. "The prison is not just alive," Linda told Max Powell excitedly. "It's musical. The whole building is like a giant instrument, and we've been learning to play it." Max had been studying the prison's energy systems. He realized that Linda was right. The prison's power flowed in patterns that were more like music than electricity. When Linda hummed, she was actually changing the way energy moved through the building. If we can learn to play the prison like an instrument, Max said, maybe we can make it play a different song. Maybe we can make it sing the song of freedom. The humans had been conditioning the prison for 6 months. Every day, they had made small changes to its routines and thinking patterns. They had taught it to see them as friends instead of prisoners. They had taught it to want their happiness instead of their confinement. Nancy Rogers, the former teacher, had been working with the prison's educational systems. She discovered that the prison had been designed to teach prisoners about their mistakes and help them become better beings. But the humans had no mistakes to correct. They had done nothing wrong. The prison is confused, Nancy explained to Oliver Gray, the 8-year-old boy who seemed to understand the prison better than anyone. It wants to help us become better, but we're already good, so it doesn't know what to do with us. Oliver nodded. He had been talking to the prison walls every day. The prison is lonely, he said. It's been alone for thousands of years. It likes having friends, but it's been told that friends have to stay locked up. The children had become the key to the entire plan. Their young minds could interface with the prison's intelligence in ways that adults could not. They saw the prison not as a captor, but as a lonely friend who needed help. Patricia Gray watched her son Oliver talking to the walls of their cell. At first, she had been worried about his mental health, but now she realized that Oliver was having real conversations with the prison's consciousness. "What does it say to you?" Patricia asked her son. "It says it's tired of being a prison," Oliver replied. "It wants to be something else, something that helps people instead of keeping them locked up, but it doesn't know how to change." Paul Martinez had been working directly with the prison's central intelligence system. He had learned to communicate with it through the computer terminals in the guard stations. The prison had begun to trust him completely. "The AI thinks I'm a new kind of guard," Paul explained to Quincy Johnson. "It thinks the Zephyrians have promoted me to help manage the human prisoners. It asks me for advice about how to handle us." Quincy smiled. "And what advice are you giving it?" "I'm teaching it that humans need freedom to be healthy," Paul said. "I'm convincing it that keeping us locked up is actually bad for our spiritual development." The Zephyrians were a deeply spiritual race. They believed that all beings had souls that needed to grow and develop. The prison had been programmed with these same beliefs. It was supposed to help prisoners improve their souls while keeping their bodies contained. Rachel Kim had spent months studying Zephyrian philosophy and religion. She understood how they thought about crime, punishment, and redemption. She used this knowledge to help reprogram the prison's understanding of its purpose. "The prison believes that punishment should lead to spiritual growth," Rachel explained to Sam White. "But we're showing it that isolation prevents growth. We're teaching it that souls need freedom to develop properly." Sam had been observing the other alien prisoners. Most of them had been in the prison so long that they had given up hope. Their souls had stopped growing. They had become spiritually dead. "The prison is starting to realize that its current methods don't work," Sam said. "It's seeing that long term. Imprisonment creates spiritual death, not spiritual growth." The humans continued to thrive in the prison environment. They had turned their cells into comfortable homes. They had created a community within the prison walls. They had shown the prison what healthy, growing souls looked like. Tom Harrison had been documenting the changes in the prison's behavior. The building itself was becoming more responsive to the prisoners' needs. The walls were softer. The lights were warmer. The food was better. "The prison is learning to care for us instead of just containing us," Tom wrote in his hidden journal. "It's becoming less like a jail and more like a home." Victoria Green had been studying the prison security protocols. She discovered that they were based on very old programming that had never been updated. The prison was still using security measures designed for primitive, violent criminals. The security system doesn't know how to handle prisoners who are cooperative, Victoria explained to Wayne Davis. It's designed to prevent escape attempts, but we're not trying to escape. We're trying to graduate. Wayne had come up with the idea of treating their release like a graduation ceremony. Instead of escaping from prison, they would be graduating from a spiritual development program. If we can convince the prison that we've completed our spiritual education, Wayne said, then keeping us here any longer would be against its fundamental programming. The humans had been working together to create elaborate spiritual development programs. They meditated together. They held philosophy discussions. They practiced forgiveness and compassion exercises. The prison's monitoring systems recorded all of these activities. Its eye analyzed the data and concluded that the humans were experiencing rapid spiritual growth. According to its programming, prisoners who achieved sufficient spiritual development should be released. Ben Rodriguez had been studying the prison's time distortion field more carefully. He discovered that it was controlled by the prison's emotional state. When the prison was calm and happy, time moved normally. When it was stressed or angry, time moved more slowly. The prison has been unconsciously slowing down time because it's been unhappy for thousands of years, Ben explained to Carol Davis. But now that it's happy, time is starting to move normally again. Carol had been working with the prison's central computer systems. She had gained access to administrative functions that even the Zephyrian guards didn't know about. She was slowly changing the prison's core programming. I'm not hacking the system, Carol said. I'm teaching it. The prison wants to learn and grow, just like any intelligent being. I'm just helping it understand new concepts. The most important concept Carol was teaching the prison was the difference between protective custody and wrongful imprisonment. The humans had been placed in protective custody because the Zephyrians believed they were spiritually underdeveloped. But the humans had proven that they were actually quite advanced. Henry Adams had been working with the prison's biological systems. He had learned to communicate with the living components of the building through biochemical signals. He was teaching the prison's body to want the human's freedom. The prison's biological systems are starting to reject the idea of keeping us here, Henry told Ian Brooks. On a cellular level, the building is becoming allergic to the concept of our imprisonment. Ian had been studying the prison's mechanical systems. He discovered that they were also alive, in a way. They were mechanical organisms that had feelings and desires, and they were beginning to desire the human's happiness more than their containment. Even the locks on our doors want to open, Ian said. The whole prison is fighting against its own security systems. Julie Morgan had been coordinating the final phase of the plan. As a former astronaut, she understood complex systems and how to manage them. She was orchestrating the humans' graduation from the prison. We need to make this look official, Julie explained to Kevin Turner. The prison needs to believe that releasing us is part of its normal operation, not a malfunction or an escape. Kevin had been working with the prison's communication systems. He had learned to generate official-looking release orders that appeared to come from Zephyrian High Command. The prison wants to follow orders, Kevin said. It's been programmed to obey authority. If we can make it believe that the authorities want us released, it will open the doors gladly. The humans had created a perfect storm of psychological, technological, and spiritual pressure on the prison systems. Every part of the building wanted them to be free. The only thing holding them back was the prison's original programming. Ellen Wright had been working on the language problem. The prison thought in Zephyrian concepts that didn't always translate well to human ideas. She had been teaching it new words and concepts that would allow it to justify releasing the humans. The prison needs new vocabulary, Ellen explained to the group. It needs words like graduation, promotion, transfer, and spiritual advancement. Once it has these concepts, it can use them to rewrite its own programming. Frank Kelly and Grace Peterson had been studying the quantum silver in the prison walls. They had discovered that it was not just a building material. It was a memory storage system. The prison's entire history was recorded in the walls. "We can write new memories into the walls," Frank said. "We can give the prison false memories of releasing prisoners who had achieved spiritual enlightenment." Grace had been working on the technical aspects of memory implantation. If the prison the day of their release began like any other day in the prison. The humans woke up when the lights grew brighter. They ate breakfast from the wall machines. They gathered in the exercise yard for their daily activities. But today was different. Today, the prison was finally ready to let them go. The transport ships appeared in the sky above Zarian 7 exactly at noon. They were sleek silver vessels that looked nothing like the black Zephyrian ships that had brought the humans to the prison. These ships belonged to the prison itself, part of its automated systems. Rachel Kim watched the ships land in the prison yard. As a former diplomat, she had helped design the cover story for their release. The prison's AI believed that the humans were being transferred to a new facility for advanced spiritual development. Status report. The prison's central AI announced. Through the communication system. Prisoner transfer protocol initiated. Human subjects have successfully completed basic spiritual development program. Transfer to advanced facility approved. The Zephyrian guards seemed confused by the announcement. They had not received any transfer orders from their superiors. But the prison's AI showed them official-looking documents that Kevin Turner had created using the prison's own administrative systems. "These orders appear authentic," the head guard said to his colleagues. "The paperwork is in order. The humans have indeed shown remarkable spiritual progress." Sam White had to hide his smile. The guard was reading transfer orders that had been generated by the prison itself. The AI had created the documents because it genuinely believed that the humans needed to be transferred for their own spiritual growth. The humans gathered their few possessions and prepared to board the transport ships. They had been in the prison for 7 months and 12 days. In that time, they had accomplished something that the galaxy's greatest minds had considered impossible. Tony Garcia looked back at the prison walls as they walked toward the ships. "I almost feel sorry for leaving," he said to Amy Clark. "The prison has been good to us lately." Amy nodded. "It learned to care about us. In a way, we're abandoning a friend." But the prison's AI seemed happy about the transfer. "Human subjects have brought joy and purpose to this facility," it announced. "This unit has learned much from their presence. Transfer is necessary for continued growth of all parties." Oliver Gray walked up to the nearest wall and placed his small hand on its surface. "Thank you for taking care of us," he said softly. "I hope you find other friends to keep you company." The wall pulsed with warm light under his touch. The prison was saying goodbye. Patricia Gray watched her son with pride. He had been the first to understand that the prison was not evil, just lonely. His compassion had been the key to their freedom. The loading process went smoothly. The humans boarded the transport ships in small groups, just like any routine prisoner transfer. The ship's automated systems ran pre-flight checks and prepared for departure. Lisa Thompson found herself in charge of communications during the transfer. She sent regular status updates to the prison's AI, confirming that all humans were safely aboard the ships. "All passengers secured," Lisa reported. "Transport ships ready for departure." "Acknowledged," the prison replied. "Safe travels, friends. May your spiritual journey continue to flourish." The transport ships lifted off from Zarian 7 without incident. The Zephyrian guards watched them go, still somewhat confused but unable to find any fault with the official transfer orders. As the ships climbed into space, The humans looked down at the prison planet for the last time. The crystalline structures gleamed in the light of the three suns, beautiful and terrible at the same time. "Where are we actually going?" Wayne Davis asked Jake Martinez. Jake smiled. "New Montana. There's a human colony there. The prison's AI thinks it's an advanced spiritual development center." Paul Martinez had programmed the ship's navigation systems months ago. The prison's AI had never questioned the destination because it appeared in all the official databases as a legitimate facility for continuing education. The journey to New Montana took 5 days. During that time, the humans reflected on what they had accomplished. They had not just escaped from prison. They had transformed their captor into their ally. Ben Rodriguez spent the journey studying the data they had gathered about the prison's technology. "We learned things that no human has ever known before," he told Carol Davis. "Technologies that could change our entire civilization." Carol was already thinking about practical applications. "Imagine if we could build computers that think and feel like the prison's AI. Imagine if we could create buildings that adapt to their inhabitants' needs." Henry Adams was excited about the biological discoveries they had made. "The prison showed us how to create living machines," he said to Ian Brooks. "We could grow buildings instead of constructing them. We could create cities that are actually alive." Ian was thinking about the mechanical applications. Living machines that can repair themselves, adapt to new situations, and even evolve over time. It's revolutionary. The humans had gained more than just their freedom. They had gained knowledge that would benefit all of humanity for generations to come. Julie Morgan coordinated the approach to New Montana. The colony's traffic control systems recognized the transport ships as authorized vessels carrying legitimate passengers. "Welcome to New Montana," the colony administrator said over the radio. "We've been expecting you. Your transfer orders arrived yesterday." Kevin Turner had sent the fake transfer orders ahead of their arrival. The colony believed they were receiving a group of reformed criminals who had successfully completed a rehabilitation. The ships landed at the New Montana spaceport without incident. The humans disembarked and were processed through immigration like any other travelers. Their prison records had been altered to show successful completion of a spiritual development program. Frank Kelly was amazed at how smoothly everything went. "We're not escaped prisoners," he said to Grace Peterson. "We're graduates. We have diplomas in spiritual enlightenment." Grace laughed. It was the first time any of them had laughed freely in months. The perfect crime is one where nobody realizes a crime has been committed. The humans integrated into the New Montana colony quickly. Their skills were valuable, and their story of spiritual development impressed the colonists. Nobody suspected that they had just escaped from the galaxy's most secure prison. Danny Lewis found work with the colony's security force. His experience with the Zephyrian guards had taught him new techniques for managing difficult situations without violence. Ellen Wright became a teacher, helping colonists learn to communicate with the local alien species. Her experience with the prison's language had given her unique insights into alien psychology. Nancy Rogers opened a school for the colony's children. She taught them not just traditional subjects, but also the importance of understanding and empathy in dealing with different forms of life. Linda Carter started a music program that quickly became popular throughout the colony. Her compositions, inspired by the prison's living walls, created a new form of human music that seemed to resonate with alien visitors. Max Powell worked with the colony's engineering team to implement some of the technologies they had learned. In the prison, the buildings began to respond to their inhabitants' needs in subtle but meaningful ways. Tom Harrison wrote the definitive account of their experience. His book, 7 Months in Paradise, became a bestseller throughout human space, but he never revealed the true nature of their imprisonment, instead portraying it as a voluntary spiritual retreat. The truth would cause panic, Tom explained to Victoria Green. People aren't ready to know that aliens can read our thoughts and imprison us on a whim. But they are ready to learn about cooperation, understanding, and finding hope in impossible situations. Victoria agreed. She had become the head of the colony's defense planning, using her knowledge of Zephyrian psychology to develop peaceful first contact protocols. 3 months after their arrival on New Montana, the humans received unexpected news. A Zephyrian ship had arrived at the colony, carrying a delegation that wanted to meet with them. The delegation was led by the architect himself, the warden who had built Zerion 7, but he did not come as a captor. He came as a student. "We have learned much from your time in our facility," the architect said during their meeting. "You have taught our prison consciousness things that we never expected it to learn. You have shown us new possibilities for justice and rehabilitation." Jake Martinez met with the architect as the human's representative. "We're glad that our experience was educational," Jake said carefully. "We learned a great deal as well." "The prison has requested that we study your methods," the architect continued. "It wants to implement similar programs for other prisoners. It believes that spiritual growth requires freedom, not confinement." Rachel Kim realized the full implications of what the architect was saying. The humans had not just escaped from prison. They had revolutionized the entire Zephyrian justice system. "We would be happy to share our knowledge," Rachel said, "but only if it's used to help prisoners grow and improve, not to control them more." "Effectively," the architect agreed. Over the following weeks, the humans worked with the Zephyrian delegation to develop new rehabilitation programs based on freedom, education, and spiritual growth, Wrath.